Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Oh Brother, a podcast about Salford/Manchester's legendary musical institution, The Fall. Each week we invite along a guest to chat about their experiences and memories of the group. You can find us at Spotify, Apple and all usual suspects, but we're hosted at play.acast.com/s/Oh Brother. All episodes are also available on YouTube. Search for Oh Brother Podcast and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. This week we're joined by the 41st best stand-up ever, the very brilliant Stewart Lee, who talked to us before his wonderful Snowflake tornado show at the Lowry in January. Hope you enjoy it.
Hello, welcome to the latest edition of Oh Brother, a podcast about the fall with me, Paul Hanley, and my esteemed brother Stephen Hanley. Delighted to say we've got our guest today. He's none other than the estimable Stewart Lee, comedian, writer, broadcaster, TV star, 41st best stand-up in...
Hanging in there.
I think, is it going up or down? With 41st with a bullet?
I don't know.
Who decides them things?
The public.
Wow.
Was it GQ?
No, I don't know what that was. I think that one was a mix of... When it's decided by broadcasters, like the Dave channel, I'm never in it. They just sort of forget. I don't think they consider to me to be a comedian of any sort. But sometimes when the public vote for it, I get into them. But then it sort of depends. Like everything these days, it depends on whether you've got an active social media profile.
Yeah.
And I haven't got one at all to drive it. I'm off it. So.
Well, I mean, we'll probably talk about that. We'll talk about the fall at some point. But that must be quite... Do you not get a push from management and things that you should have one?
No, but I know there's certain jobs you can't get anymore because the first thing people do is look at how many followers you've got for something.
Yeah.
And I also think that rumours grow about you because everyone else is instantly there to clarify what's been said about them.
Yeah.
But as a Fall fan, I quite like it, the unfocused mystery that surrounds things where, I liked not really knowing and the group not being the sort of group that had a presence where you knew them as personalities.
Yeah.
So you're focused on the work.
Yeah.
So I kind of think...
It's because we didn't have a personality.
No, there's no...
But it's funny that, because it's that whole thing with the fall, because there's certain people who are obsessed with it, and it's like... It's gradually everything's being found out. So there was, did they play there in this year? I have no idea. And they're filling in the blanks now, so that basically, at some point in the near future, someone's going to be able to tell you everything you did between 1979 and 1998.
That's true of everything, isn't it? I found this really pro-feminist quote by Tony Parsons. And I thought, from now, right? And I thought, I bet, and because I bet he said something the opposite of that in the past. Right?
Yes,
because that's the thing now, isn't it? Like, people getting caught out by what they've said before. Yeah. So I just put loads of different combinations of Tony Parsons and different words into search engine. Eventually, I found this thing.
Slow down, wasn't it?
From 2003, where he was saying women are the same as bananas, and he likes them firm and fresh. I was going, But it's just that. I mean, everything is found now, isn't it?
Yes.
Everything is found, but then it is amazing. I mean, I was thinking about the first time I saw The Fall was at the Elephant Fayre, but also, weirdly, earlier on in that day was John Martin, you might remember.
Yeah.
And a 16-year-old in 1984 didn't know who John Martin was because the immediate past just evaporated.
Yes, it did.
And he came out, and this bloke, he looked like nothing. He did this amazing hour with echoplexes, which, I'd never heard anything like it. And I was saying to people, who's that? And old hippies are going, it's John Martin, why didn't you know that? And of course, pretty soon after that, he became not very good anyway, Then the other day I was thinking about it, and I thought, I wonder if, that's there. And I put John Martin Elephant Fayre into the search engine, and a recording comes up of a couple of the songs. It's just as I remembered it, with not many people there, or people talking, and, everything's just...
Yeah.
It's amazing now is when you can't find something.
Yes, that's right, yeah. But there isn't a fall recording from Elephant Fayre, I don't believe, anyway. I don't think
I've got one.
There you go.
Yeah.
I was looking at the set
list. I put it on a little tape, when you used to go in the market.
Yeah.
About a week later, from getting the little tapes with
Yeah, well, I was looking at the set. That was quite the greatest hits, that set. There's 6 singles in the set. That must have been our festival set. That must have been Briggs' influence, that.
Yeah.
Because it was far more crowd pleasing. Well, it's all relative.
Well, and a really long version of Garden as well.
It's famed for its short.
Could never go on too long, as far as I was.
Well, that's the thing. The Peel session version of that is longer than some other Peel sessions.
Yeah.
It's just relentless, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting because there's that recording onto Charles Turns where he's shouting, stop bloody improvising. And yet it seems to me that, lest Mark didn't notice that's what you were doing, that a lot of the songs are built on fairly sturdy foundations, but then with lots of like improvisations over them.
Yeah, that was the Carl thing, wasn't it? If you can get that one note and do something with it for 15 minutes, that's when you... Like Andy State and all that.
Yeah, that was the kind of thing Carl taught us, didn't it?
Yeah.
To use that one riff and play it in loads of different ways and build it up and drop it back down again. And we learned that from him, really.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. I mean, he needed, because of that first album, he's in doing whatever the hell he likes, and it's just like... So when he went off and came back, he was slightly more under control, if you like. But that's when I think he was brilliant, Carl. Man. Without, being in, when we had the two drummers, he was just off the chart drummer. I was just, in awe of him, really. But having said that, I play all the good bits on Garden anyway. But...
Do you know what he's doing now?
No.
I was saying everyone knows everything.
Except about Carl.
So where Carl Burns is,
we tried to track him down, didn't we? When Paul's book came out.
Right.
But I went to the last place I'd known where he was living, but...
The old Asian woman sat in the living room didn't know much about him, did she?
No.
Yeah, he's the Uncle Ben of the Fall, he's the only one they don't bring back to life, I think.
Yeah, he's managed to move.
Yeah, I mean, it must be, it's deliberate on his part. Fairly recently you had contact with him.
It's not that recently now, it's when the Fallen came out.
Yeah.
The Dave Simpson book, he rang me because they'd been in touch with him for like an extra chapter for the paperback, and he was debating on whether to do it or not. He ended up not doing it, and then he rang me a couple of times, but that's the last I've heard from him.
Why did he not do it?
I don't know.
Because he
didn't like the way he'd been portrayed through that book.
Did you ever discuss how he was portrayed in your book? Or did you never get that far?
Well, I've not been in contact with him since...
Oh, of course, the Fallen was before, wasn't it? Yeah.
No.
So he's definitely not getting back in touch now. No, I'm joking. He comes across very well.
Yeah. Actually, but then another thing about it is all the books. And I haven't, you know what? There's so many books. There's about 4 I haven't read now. That have come out.
You have to keep up.
Yeah, there's another one coming out soon.
There's another one.
It's You Must Get Them All. It was a blog.
Oh, yeah. That's a good blog.
It is. It will be a good book, I think. I think it's a great blog. I don't know what. Have you had a copy of it then?
No, but he's. I think he wants me to write an intro for it or something now. Another one of my main jobs is writing. But there's so many different books now that, as a fan, you realise it makes you think about what is a true story, because so many different people remember things differently.
A lot of it. I don't think there is such a thing as a true story.
When they made that documentary about the Nightingales with Mark,
that was great. Yeah,
I'm really glad you thought it's very funny. But that became immediately apparent from the start that no one would remember the incidents the same.
Yeah.
So we made that a feature of it, rather than trying to get a definitive thing. We would cut it to immediately someone saying, "I was there and that never happened."
John Taylor,
John Taylor's.
We never
supported. Good sport, wasn't he, to do that?
Yeah.
We had to get him on like one day in between being in Barbados and outer space.
Yeah, because I thought that watching Let It Be.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And so if you not Let It Be, Get Back.
Yeah.
So if you watch Let It Be and then you watch Get Back, they're two different stories, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember watching that Beatles documentary that came out, the sort of 12-part one in the early 90s.
Anthology one.
Yeah. And all I remembered about that period was. It's funny enough, I started doing it on stage last night, his voice and this bit, and no one in the audience knew what the fuck I was doing. But when George Harrison's going, "My only desire is to please you, make you happy," to Paul McCartney, when you've only seen that bit, you think, God, that must have been an awful period.
Yeah.
But then you watch that 15 and a half hour long Billy Jackson one, you go, oh no, it's like anything. It was all different bits, and that's what you get from all the 4 books, actually. That it wasn't, everyone had different highs and lows. So it was,
Well, it's like that Let It Be turns out to be about Lindsay Hogg in the end, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think he's the star of the film. There's a great bit when they pull him up on the roof and he's like, "I'm making no effort whatsoever here." And then Paul McCartney's pulling him up on the roof. This is Paul McCartney. He twists his finger here.
Yeah.
But I thought that was brilliant, that Peter Jackson.
Yeah, it was really good, wasn't it? I mean, and it also showed...
Watch that.
Well, it showed people trying to collaborate.
Yeah.
And, And also, you always, Lennon in that period, they're going, he was just on heroin, he was useless. But it's only the first bit when he's useless. He sort of wakes up a bit towards the end.
It was a terrible idea. Well, let's all sit round in a studio. It's like a film studio. It's like a big bloody...
Yeah.
It's like a warehouse, and they just have to sit there with 14 million cameras on them and write an album. It's not the easiest.
No.
So where were we? We must talk about there's the Fall. That must come up at some point. So King Rock. I was going to say about King Rocker. Do you think there's do you think that's a possibility? Not that I want you want to do, but how you'd make a definitive thing about the Fall? Because there is that one that they did with the.
Yeah, that wasn't great.
It wasn't great. No.
Well, I remember being a talking head in one for the BBC about 20 years ago.
Right.
I think it was called The Wonderful and Frightening. I suppose the difference now
Your bit was good.
I was going to say your bit's really good, Steve.
Well, no, they were. I mean, I suppose, I don't know. I mean, I suppose the story's sort of finished now.
Yeah.
And there was... Mark had a lot of say in that and who they talked to.
Yeah, I guess it would be easier now. The thing about the Nightingales was they were... if you're a John Peel listener from the 80s, you know who they are. But to most people, it was unknown. So what it became was a story about some guy trying to do a thing for 45 years. And people like my stepfather's partner, who's 80, related to it as that and wasn't really interested in it being about how post-punk impacted on the industrial Midlands. The thing about the Fall is so many people got a stake in it, haven't they? It would be like a nightmare to... And so many people would feel that it hadn't represented or it had represented or it wouldn't, I don't know. I really don't know how you do things. We did that film just the way we did it because as soon as we started filming it, we realised that everyone had different stories. I mean, it happened here actually on Mark Riley's show. It was the first bit of film we did, and I realised that in that day, no one could remember everything. It all contradicts each other. I thought there's going to have some fun with this, But there's a lot of footage. The other thing about the Nightingales film is there's hardly any footage, right? We didn't have much for budget, but in a way it wasn't a problem because there's only 3 bits of film with them. Whereas there's a lot of stuff, isn't it, to choose from?
There is,
weirdly.
Surprisingly, because obviously the Hacienda thing was a big thing because they filmed everything. Yeah. So there's a lot of film from that. But even in America and stuff, there's that, Totally Wired and from the Monk Club and stuff. You never see bands at that level.
Thing on that Tony Wilson programme from the first album where it was a single light bulb in what looks like sort of a cellar in a prison.
Yes, that's John Cooper Clarke's house.
Was it?
Yeah, because that was Eric, who's the bass player. John Cooper Clarke sort of gave him the Fall, if you like. That'd be too good. Yeah, so he was John Cooper Clarke, one of his musicians, and he said when they were looking for a bass player, you should have Eric. He'll do it. So that's in John Cooper Clarke's house now. I don't know where it is. It's somewhere up in Ronstall.
It might just be too big a story as well, because that's the thing that the whole story, that's the thing about that book about all who's been in it. That became like a sort of social history of post-war. What sorts of people did different things.
Yeah.
If you focused in on a bit of it, like just your story or someone that was in it for 9 months or something, maybe that would be a way of, I don't know really,
Because it's a shame that it ended when it did, because and I know you've talked about that last 10 years. It's been a real, because it's like a happy ending in a way, isn't it?
I've been listening to the first 20 years today, and that is one that's sort of got a through line, isn't it?
Yeah,
really, mainly built around you, Steve. Being all the way through that period, and that sound is so distinctive to it, And then the last 10 years seem to have an identity as well. I'm not saying it was the best, but it did seem to have a stability to it.
Yeah, I think it was probably what Mark thought was the best. I think it served him better, and I think weirdly they got to be more the Fall that he wanted them to be because he left them alone to do it, which is a bit of a
Yeah, I think it's. I don't know. Don't know from close up, but as an onlooker, it seemed to serve him better because he got to the point where he wasn't concerned about the intricacies of arriving at the correct point in songs. Not that it was ever a huge concern. The sort of music that you were doing with him had middle eights, or it had
verses and
there was some senses of structure.
There were structured things that he would have to get right. And then he got to the point where really it was was like a platform that had a relationship with sort of rock music, but he could kind of do what he wanted.
Come in and out and do,
And I mean, so the case in point being, when the lineup before that fell apart in Tucson or somewhere on a Tuesday, by Thursday he got a load of American blokes to play these six simple riffs, and that became quite a good lineup. Because that suited that thing.
It's great, that Dark of My Love, that's them, isn't it? That's amazing, because he didn't do that. When Steve left, if you look at the gigs they did immediately after that, it was like Julia and a Casio and
I saw one which ended with Michael Clark holding a stool over his head, and they talk about and that was the "If it's me and your granny on bongos," it's all quote. And I don't know them, but I remember speaking to. I remember it was at the Dingwalls. I remember Damon Albarn and Juliet Frischman from Elastica, I think were a couple at the time, sort of standing at the bar looking traumatised and shell-shocked. Well, members of the public tried to comfort them almost. It was really strange.
That's what he's probably thinking. People think I like this shit.
It was just worrying and baffling, you know.
But
the thing to get up and do it is
you're right.
Because that gig was actually booked. That was supposed to be. I was booked to do that gig. That was the next gig after we got back from. Supposed to be the next gig after we got back from America.
Right. Okay.
So it was fairly recent. It's fairly short.
Pretty quick, short order.
You got to give it info.
Definitely.
This feels a bit ghoulish, and I feel bad about talking about it. But I know Carlton B. Morgan, who's a writer from South Wales, and he'd written a novel with this American writer Camden Joy, who's a great novelist. They wrote a novel about an archaeologist trying to find the severed head of the statue of Pan in South Wales, and a guy who knew him going to see the fall on that gig where everyone fell out, right? Mm-hmm. And the stories kind of cross over.
Right. Because there's a graphic novel about that gig in here as well,
Anyway, Carlton had got the film of that. He got a film of that night. And it was a weird thing to see. And then when they were making that BBC thing, the woman said, "Do you know anyone who's got the film of that?" And I went, "Well, I do, but it feels like an absolute betrayal of trust to tell anyone where it is." But they did find it somehow, you know.
It's all it's all on YouTube now, isn't it? Yeah. It's telling you what, it sounds great. Yeah. It does. When you actually all get four of you on stage at the same time.
Did you feel relieved about that in the end? Afterwards, or more about it finishing like that, or more?
No. I think, if you do something like that for 20 years and you reach 40, you kind of think that this is you.
Yeah.
No, it was quite cast adrift.
Right.
Yeah. Quite traumatised by it, weren't you? Yeah.
Well, it was not so much that, it was the years building up to it before it, which was pretty grim. I did try writing a follow-up to the big video. I said this in the podcast.
It doesn't matter.
During the lockdown, but it was just too difficult.
Was it? I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it was just it would have been what we call a misery memoir.
Yeah.
So
only for a bit though. Do you not think? Did you kind of?
But then we get it together, and then we joined Tom Ingley's band.
Yeah.
But then you start writing about that, and it's. Did a good gig, had a pint, went home. It's like
there's not a lot.
This is not interesting.
It's the chaos and fear.
But it might not be what you want to do, but it's certainly easier to write about what you would think.
But how often can you write that?
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, that becomes there's no story there. Once. But
that's what I find. There's no story to what I do now. I come to places like this, and actually here. I can be back at the hotel on the other side of the docks by 11 in bed. If I'm playing my cards right,
But it's a wearying thing, though, isn't it? And I wouldn't like to think he did it deliberately, Mark, because there's no tension and there's no artistic tension. So you've got to make everyone's life a fucking misery in order to create enough creative tension to move you on.
Well, a bit of that.
That's a bit depressing.
Yeah, but a bit of that I can see, but when it goes over the top, when it goes too far.
But I don't think. Well, the falls. It's not what people get from gigs. I don't think anymore, do they? They're all very slick these days. I think.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things. You know what? I was in I was in the Imperial War Museum here the other day. When lockdown started, I thought, I'm sick of wearing these boring masks. I'll go on Reddit and see what they've got that I like. So I've got some of Italian westerns, one of something else. I got one of the first. I've got a face mask somewhere of the first album lineup of the Fall. Yeah, and I was wearing it, but I thought, oh, I better not wear that today. It look a bit weird, but I've told you about it anyway. I was coming out of the Imperial War Museum, and the security guard woman went, "Oh, come here, love, let me embrace you." And I thought, uh-oh, she's seen a gig of mine, and it'd be all right. And she went, and then she didn't know who I was. She wanted to talk about the Fall, right? And so many people do this. If they know you're a fan, they bump into you somewhere. People talk about how they went for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, some people, and they miss the sort of the kind of football fan aspect of it, where you were committed to some team, and
good or bad,
yeah, and you didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah,
you know what going to, and you didn't. If a gig went really wrong, it didn't matter, because there'd be another one along in 4 months' time, and that would be totally different. And sometimes you could go 3 nights in a row to the same venue, and you people are working something out or whatever, and each night would be completely different. And that is an anathema to people now.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
They want to. I mean, I went to see Idols, who I liked, the other day, and it was great. And one of the things about it was the lighting show was uncharacteristically well thought out for a rock gig. But afterwards, I thought, well, that means they've got to hit certain.
It'll be exactly the same every night.
There's got to be a certain. Whereas, you didn't really know with and it wasn't just because we didn't know what state Mark was going to be in. Sometimes it would be because the whole thing would lock into something that would go up a level, and you didn't really know.
Well, you've talked about that before. You can play the same riff one night and play the same the next, and it'd be shit. But I'm not sure how you quantify it.
But that is the same with like there's 2 bits, there's 4 or 5 bits in this current show in stand-up where I can go to different things if it picks up. And there's a guy who's been 3 times this week, and he sits near the front, and it's become quite funny because I started talking to him last night. I got to this bit about cesspits, right? And on a good night, there's this one word of it that usually makes the audience really laugh, and I can go off into this improvisation that I can change every night. And it didn't happen last night for whatever reason. They just didn't laugh at this one word they normally laugh at. And I said to the bloke on the front row, I went, "That's weird, because I can't do that bit now." And he went, "Yeah, it was 15 minutes last night." I said, "I can't do it tonight. You've seen, see what I mean?" I said, "See what I mean? How hard it?" I said, "See how hard it is for me? Every night I have to make choices in real time about what direction to go in, and yet I still have to get back to the main story of it. It's very difficult." And then he went, "Well, it is your job."
But that's really shining daylight on the magic. I know you do that when you do transcribe the books, but that's cheating, isn't it? Do you get resentment from other comedians from that? Or
has anyone else done that?
No, that's what I'm saying. It's like the magic circle, do you know?
Well, I think it's funny, I only brought it up though because you can listen to recordings of the same, like that whole America tour period and on the Australia New Zealand one. I mean, there's a lot of recordings of the Australia New Zealand period now, and within a week, the whole thing kind of changed completely different.
Yeah.
I mean, when those started coming out, when the Melbourne one came out, and then all the New Zealand, the extra ones that weren't on Fall in a Hole. And that's absolutely fascinating, is it? Seeing that one night it could be 15 minutes, another night 6, the same thing, and totally different spins on things.
Well, I think that was the author of its own demise, that lineup. I think in Mark's eyes, I think we got a bit too good at it. Good being good is obviously subjective, but I think he thought we were turning into a band. I think that's what he didn't, and obviously clearly that's what he did with Room to Live. And I know you really like Room to Live.
Yeah, but it's an act of self-sabotage.
Yes, and I can look at it now. The way I'm looking at it, because since I wrote the book about X, I did it, and I can look at it now as a piece of work. I think that's quite clever. That.
Yeah,
it's always been coloured by our experience.
Yeah, but it's not the logical progression from Hex.
No, not at all.
It was like he tried to shake people off or something.
Well, there's no like about it. He definitely did try to shake people off. That was definitely his intention.
And musically as well, though, because maybe given 6 months, those songs might have been.
Well, they did. If you look at Marquee Cha-Cha, I remember, that one that's on Room to Live is seriously probably, if not the first, then it's the second time me and Steve had ever played.
Ever played. Really?
Yeah,
the actual recording that's on.
Yeah. Right. Well, you can tell if you listen to it. If you listen to it with that in mind, you think, these fuckers don't know what they're doing in it. Which is kind of great in a way.
Yeah, I know it is because sometimes there's so many with the radio sessions, isn't it? And the first one was like,
that's the great thing about Peel sessions. But you don't put that out as your makeup, do you?
No.
Normally.
No.
So, I was talking about bands that can do that. The only person I can think of, Dylan does it a bit, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But, I mean, that takes some doing that. But then you've got to have fans who are absolute obsessives, haven't you?
Yeah, I took my kids to see Bob Dylan. They were 9 and 12 at the time, and I just thought, you know what, you should do.
Yeah.
And I do really like him as well, but I appreciate it's frustrating for me because, it was at Hyde Park. And he's playing. No one knows what the hell he's playing. and there are like people that they're holding up their phones with that app on, trying to identify the song.
Shazam!
He was playing something and it had been going on for ages. No one knew what it was. And my daughter went, "Oh, it's blowing in the wind." I went, "Is it?" And then these old Dylanologist blokes in front went, "Yeah, it is actually that." She sort of picked up something. But I think he's great like that because he for him, there's not a definitive version of any of the songs now.
That's right.
Each one is just a moment in time, and I'm lucky enough actually to get a copy of this 20 CD thing of everything that Dave records in the studio in 65, 66.
Yeah.
Now, if you've got the time, which I did have in the first half of lockdown, to go through it all and hear how they were all spun is really great. But I think it's a brilliant thing to do that because it reminds those audiences, and a lot of the people that go to Dylan, they want to hear the hits. They don't really know what they're going to get.
It's too big. He's too big to do that, isn't he? In a way,
it's just a strange thing in between. He comes out from behind the keyboard after about every 3 or 4 songs. He just sort of stands like that and looks around with his hands on his hips, and then goes and sits back down again. Absolutely bizarre.
Well, he can't stand up to sing, so I'll just go and have a sit down.
Yeah.
He's of the age where having a sit down is an activity.
Yeah,
what are you doing this afternoon? I'm going to have a sit down.
But, apart from the obvious gap in economics, I think that there's a lot of similarities between the Dylan and the Four.
Yeah, definitely.
The different people that come in could completely change the sort of the feel of it, and yet there's an identity in it that drives it along as well.
Which is always been interesting because it's the Fall, isn't it? It's not Mark E. Smith.
Yeah,
he could have done that. Couldn't he? He could have done that quite easily. If he'd have said to you, Martin Brahmer's leaving. I'm not going to call it the Mark E. Smith. I'm going to call it the Mark E. Smith band. You wouldn't have said, "No, I'm not fucking doing that."
No.
Well, I met Robert Fripp once from King Crimson, and I'm sure you're all huge fans. But he said that King Crimson existed as this kind of entity that was beyond him, and he knew when it was time, when something was King Crimson and when it wasn't, even when it was completely different people. He seemed to have a sort of idea in his head of what it was, and I think there is a sort of idea of what the Fall is to a fan, and it can encompass a thing that sounds a bit like Italian dance music, and it can also encompass something that sounds like a Stooges outtake.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to say exactly what it was, which is weird when people say it all sounds the same, because it sounds more radically different than any other band with a comparatively long lifespan. Most people have to keep knocking out things that have some relationship.
You have to sound like yourself.
Yeah.
But so why is Post Nearly Man not a Fall album then? That's
probably because there's not enough music.
Yeah, it's spoken word, isn't it?
It's Mark talking with a load of racket in the background. Yeah, you'd never get away with that in a Fall album, would you?
No, it's just different enough, isn't it? That's,
I don't know.
The answer is probably. It was probably, you'd know more about it than me, probably down to some contractual obligation.
Probably, yeah.
Very
possibly.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, because he was never interested in being a solo artist, was he? And that's what I always hated about it's me and your granny on bongos, because it clearly isn't you and your granny on bongos. You can tell when it's you and your granny on bongos. Yeah. And it's really, I think it's quite insulting in a way.
It was insulting, and it was probably meant to be. And it was defensive, wasn't it? And it was also a way of. A lot of what he seemed to do was about shutting down discussion, wasn't it? He didn't want to have to answer particular kinds of questions. So in interviews, he would say obtuse things or behave strangely. So, and I know I was supposed to interview Rocky Erickson once from the 13 Elevators for some paper, and everyone said he'd gone mad and he thought frogs were orchids and stuff. He did much the same thing. I think he had gone a bit mad, but he partly pretended to think he was from space or something because he didn't really want to have to talk about tuning his guitars or whatever.
Yeah, I really miss that with interviews. They're not like that anymore, are they? An interview with Marky Smith, it was completely separate from listening to a record. Yeah. It's an event in its own right.
I suppose that is the thing. There's this other body of work, isn't there, which is the stories that surround it, that are created by him, what his reaction to him, and then by other people's contradictory memories of what they were. You know, there's a story in your book that I made up.
I know.
Okay, I'm glad you know that. I feel bad about it. Did you know at the time that I'd made it up?
I've talked about this with the publisher.
So I did a sort of experiment. I thought, I wonder if you make something up.
No. I have talked about this with the publisher, with Salford, and he said, because Mark used to do that.
Right.
He would send, it does come up online every now and again, that Marky Smith sent me a postcard from where.
Paul researchers should put one up, aren't they?
Yeah.
From the scars.
He used to do that for every enemy, every Christmas I'd get a card from him, and so we rationalised it, that it's a story, but it shows Mark. It shows how Mark was.
Yeah, it was I think it's a story about Franz Kafka. I just thought somebody was asking me about it. I just thought, I wonder if we just make something up, like what traction it would get. I can't imagine it would end up in the.
But it's the spirit of the. I know it gets a bit wanky at this point. It's in the spirit of that's what
I thought. It was plausible.
Yeah. But that's what I think's, without being funny, that's what's quite amazing about your book is it's like a novel, isn't it?
So the idea, yeah.
But
so it's whatever.
It's about that kind of, even if it's not exactly, because you got me saying stuff I never said. I wouldn't in a million years have told Bricks that Elves was a rip-off of I Want to Be Your Dog. No way, because you'd have come back and told me.
We come back round to the people's memory of it.
And well, I'm braver in your memory than I was in
well, actually,
he's improved during his memory.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot of it's scenes, isn't it?
Yeah.
Obviously, you set the scene, you're in some dressing room, and you're trying to remember what people say, and you say what you believe they might say.
Yeah, well, I'm quite prepared to say that I said, this is a complete lift of I Want to Be Your Dog. Great, that breaks, thanks, can't wait to record this.
But there was about 4 complete lifts of I Want to Be Your Dog by the end of the run of the whole thing.
I mean, it's a good riff to Nick, isn't it?
Yeah. Nothing exists in isolation, does it?
No.
And that's another thing, mate, you're talking about making, if you wanted to make a film about the fall, you'd have to communicate to people the mindset whereby things were not known, were they, beyond a certain... You were in, like, the biggest cult bands that your mum hadn't heard of.
Yes, that's right,
Sort of a really hard thing to explain there.
It was one of the... What do you do? I'm in a band. What are you called? They're the Fall. Never heard of them. You know, that was...
And the next question.
Do you remember...
Have you ever been on top of the pops?
Have you ever been on top of the pops? No.
Well, with us, it was always... with me, it's always, did you ever play Jongleurs? Because our office goes there at Christmas. And I go, no, I've got a 6-night run at the Salford, Lowry. And they go, yeah, but have you done Jongleurs? Because we go there at Christmas. Do you remember the Moodists? Right?
Yes, yeah.
Dave Graney's still going on. I get on very well with him. He wrote a great book called How to Be a Bludge or something. Anyway, part of it was about when the Moodists were a Peel band in the 80s, and he was working in shops and stuff in London and restaurants and things, and people would go, what are you? And you go, I'm a musician. And they go, oh, my brother is in a weddings covers band, actually. You should get together and jam with him. And he'd go, well, it's not really like that. Then one Christmas, because he was Australian, the office where he was working gave him a T-shirt of Nick Cave. And he was like, they had members crossing over, and he would always be opening for him, and it was so funny. He's really good on that, how fucking embarrassing it is having to explain what you do.
Yeah.
Where you're in this twin world where some people are going, oh, I can't believe it, I love your stuff. And then even your own family are going, well, we've never heard of you. And then they come and see you and they're embarrassed because it's not they thought.
We talked about that. We did an episode at Christmas with our 2 brothers who are, obviously. And basically, it was just my brother Harry saying, I always thought you were shy. And we took a book with him. The family folklore is that he came to see us at the Fig Trip and brought a book with him to read. He reckons it was for on the bus and he never got it out. I'm still not convinced. But that whole thing was like, my mum and dad never saw the fall. It wouldn't have crossed their mind in a million years.
Weird that, isn't it? Not even the ballet or the play or anything. No.
I mean, it would be...
The only time my dad ever saw me play was the band we formed after we left the Fall Ark at the Witchwood in Ashton under
You did him no favours there?
That's it.
Jesus. No, but I mean, it wasn't what Dads did, I don't think. And
No, but also it wasn't. It's hard to go back to that time and remember when things could just be not known.
Yeah.
But be viable, but not known.
But that whole idea of a cut-off as well, where dads don't listen to that, that's gone as well now completely, hasn't it? I mean...
Yeah, I mean, that is weird. I mean, it's difficult for my son, because obviously one of the things a kid tries to do is they try to establish their own identity.
Yeah.
And he got into Mogwai, and he's going, have you heard this? And I went, oh yeah, I think I saw them at the George Roby in 1993, playing to 12 people, opening for the Scud Mountain Boys, who were alternative country band. I could see him go,
Look for something else.
Not happened to you yet, no? Not too cool for you?
I think so.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, you straight in with. But that thing about the Fall is, it's gone now. People I talk to seem to know who the Fall are now.
yeah, they do, and they seem to be thought of as significant. And I think actually, it's a bit like Barry Cryer died yesterday.
Yes.
Like loads of people dimly knew who he was. His sort of face on things. I don't watch the panel shows, but I know he's been on a lot of them lately.
Yeah.
But suddenly, the obituaries enabled you to see that since 1953, he wrote for all the first wave of people.
Yeah.
And then he was also able to work for Dave Allen, and then he was also, in the end, part of sort of our circuit as well. And then when you add all that up, people realise he's sort of not noticed in his life almost, and then it really adds up to something. And I think it was a bit like when the obituaries came out, people realised that this thing was actually gone on for ages and was quite significant.
Yeah.
And wasn't just this sort of background noise in the middle of the afternoon at a festival or something. It was like a thing that had really done something. And I think it is a shame, but that does happen a lot, that it takes the end of something for people to understand it. But actually, even as a fan, actually, when it finished, I wasn't. It's quite nerve-wracking being a fan of the Fall, because you worry what's going to happen next.
It's incredible, that, isn't it?
It was.
What a thing to say. Imagine being at unless unless it was Slipknot and you thought someone might throw a knife at you.
Yeah.
Why would you ever be scared?
But it was also but when it finished, you could sort of get when it finished, you could sort of get a perspective on the whole thing. And I suddenly found it much funnier than I ever had, and it seemed sort of really absurd in a kind of surrealist art kind of way, that you had this voice of this man that, by all accounts, couldn't really sing, but going over all these different kinds of music over the decades, and loads of the words that were like social commentary jumped out more when a line was drawn under it. It sort of made it just made more sense when it finished. As does Barry Cryer, although he's not a similar thing to the.
Well, it is kind of it's that whole thing of the Velvet Underground thing that people who not that many people bought the album everybody did went out and formed a band. So it was that comedian's comedian kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it's good actually, because the last 2 days all these Barry Cryer jokes have been doing the rounds, and they're all the sort of jokes you kind of forget that are really funny, and people think they can tell them, but they can't.
No.
A couple are walking along the street, and the wife goes, "Isn't that the Archbishop of Canterbury over there?" And the bloke goes, "I don't know, I'll go and ask him." He goes over, "You the Archbishop of Canterbury?" The bloke goes, "Fuck off." He goes back to his wife, "What did he say? Is it the Archbishop of Canterbury?" "Oh, he just told me to fuck off." And she says, "Well, we'll never know."
Brilliant.
But I mean, it's only with the end. He was once I was in a car with Tim Bradford, who's a writer, and he said to me, "Do you know loads of people in showbiz and comedy?" I went, "I don't really know anyone. I sort of know Harry Hill socially and Kevin Eldon, the actor. Other than that, I don't really see anyone. I'm not really." And then the phone rang, and I took the call. And I went, "Oh yeah, right." And he went, "Who was that?" And I went, "It's Barry Cryer." Makes it look like, but he used to ring you up. He used to ring.
Apparently so. He used to.
I was going to ask you that. Were you one of his phone people?
Oh, I was, and of course you think you're special, and then the obituaries come out. There's about 500 people, and he used to ring me every year. I went, "You must have sat there all day, ringing me everyone's birthday."
And a joke for everyone. That's great, isn't it? But he was the good thing about it. Well, lots of good things about him, but he never got to that. These comedians, these
no, he didn't. And actually, he was good in the opposite direction, because he wanted to let us know when we were young that actually everything before 1979 wasn't just people going, there's one of the Asian family who moved in there. He wanted you to know that there'd been other kinds of stuff, and he'd been part of that. So he was really good like that. You know, and I think, but again, it's funny, these sort of gateway things. That's sort of what, you know, that was another thing about the fall. If you're lucky enough to get into it as a teenager, it was more difficult in the 80s because you couldn't find stuff, but you were pushed towards finding out about Can or Captain Beefheart. And then some of in the words, the allusions to different writers and stuff were
definitely.
Or even the name of it. I mean, I read Camus at 13 because of the fall. Because it was, and you know, so it was a sort of that and Peel and at BBC Two was a kind of alternative educational.
Yes,
if you followed the tributaries down.
But that was that. It's become that whole thing of clever working class people. I mean, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but it seems to me that it's almost impossible for it to be a working class musician and clever and have something to say at the same time. I think.
Well, it's because a lot of the little support networks that you could get by and have sort of disappeared. Like squats, grants for education, things like that. You know. So we think we're more free and we've got more options, but actually lots of things have...
But I mean, it's the term... I'm done about it, but it's in everything now. Acting, there's no... You know, there was that big watershed moment when Bowie and Alan Rickman died at the same time, and it was like the last working class actor, because it doesn't exist really anymore. My nephew's trying to be an actor, and you've got to be in London at 9 o'clock in the morning, and by the way, we might call you back at 7 that night. So that's 2 nights in a hotel in London for the merest sniff of getting anywhere. So you're not getting that from, you know, councils.
And the music is pretty much the same, isn't it? You've got to have money now to do it.
I think so.
You can,
and what surprises me about music is how good musicians everybody are. The idea that Pete Hook could go into the Sex Pistols, buy a bass from Maysville Radio and be playing a gig a week later, you know, with dots written on the top.
But the other thing you get is they don't seem to develop creatively at the same speed, because like there's this sort of slightly, I think they've finished it up now, but there's this sort of hippie-ish kind of 70s style sort of folk rock band that I like called Wolf People, and they made about 4 albums in a decade and a half because they all had to have jobs. And you know that you would have done that in 2 years. And with the development, but everyone was hanging into some cheap housing by the skin of their teeth, or some part-time job or piecework or whatever, and getting a bit off the music. But it did mean that the acceleration was fast. But then also these sort of major label indie bands, they have to go and work all the different territories, don't they, and then come back and do the next. It's kind of the development's kind of held back by economics and marketing.
Well, especially now. I mean, with the pandemic, closing gigs, there is I can't see there's any viable way to be an indie band, and that's what do you do for a living? I mean, a band that plays small venues, and you couldn't be done.
You don't want to end up sounding like someone. I mean, I always think it's like someone going, this should be dry stone walling. Why is it breeze block? But there's no skill in it. But you feel that actually with comedy, what's happened is that the show you're coming to see tonight, there's not going to be many shows like that in the future, because that's a show written by someone, and it could be anyone, but it's a show written by someone who put their craft on the circuit, doing 5 nights a week in clubs, and trying to put a sort of 20 minutes together and then an hour, and then you end up doing 2 hours and you have an idea of how it all fits together. What happens now is someone will get really famous from doing 90-second things on the internet, then they try and then the promoter tries to put them out there. And the show, that's what the show's like. The show's like little things stuck together. It's not like a piece, and because actually the process of discovery, it's too expensive now for them to move to a population centre which has got more than 20 clubs in it at the age of 21 and try and do it. They need to get on with, they can't afford the rent, they can't do what we did, which is basically take 10 years off to sort of risk and see what happens, and
So is it still comedy? Still everyone writing their own material, because it never was, and then everybody was. It
wasn't until about 79. Then it was, and now most of the people that are, if they're a big name and they also do acting and TV presenting, they're probably not writing it.
Right.
But well, some of them it's out in the open, so we can say Jack Whitehall was written by Freddie Cyburn. His stand-up. Frankie Boyle has a number of people, but to be fair, he does have a distinctive sort of tone, so they kind of know what they're writing for, and he does write as well. Michael McIntyre, a lot of it is Paul Tonkinson. A lot of it's is old material, actually, just changed a bit.
Right. Is there anything wrong with that, though? I mean,
well,
if I play devil's advocate,
depends if you're coming across as you.
Okay, what I think's wrong with it as like a shop steward is that if you write a hit single or a play, your name's on it and you get royalties on it. What tends to happen with those people is they get a day rate for going in and workshopping.
Really? Ah, right, okay. Well, I suppose there's no royalty rate for I wrote that job.
But then it's not like the tour of that person doesn't say written by so-and-so.
Yeah, they hide it on panel shows, don't they? They put scripts at it.
They call them program consultants.
Program consultants, yeah.
I felt so naive, and I'd never done any of those. And I went along, when I was getting married, I was in a bit of trouble financially. Well, I got offered one, and it was about 700 quid or something like that. It was like a lot. I thought, whether I found out later, everyone else was on about 3 times. But I went along to it, and then you need to go in the writer's room. I thought, what? And then all these people have written loads of stuff for the show that if you want it, you can learn it and say it.
Right.
And I thought everyone was making it up. I had no idea. I felt such a bloody idiot. And of course, when it started, I just did not know what to do because I didn't understand that it was a sort of an act of learned things being said, and I felt so naive. And I did 3 of them and I never did them again because I liked it. One of the nice things in that film with Rob Lloyd, this is what I was thinking about, why I couldn't figure out the panel shows is, he's funny, right? But you sometimes sort of manoeuvre him to a point where you give him the laugh.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You sort of... You kind of do yourself down to allow him to.
Yeah.
You can sort of for the camera you can kind of work a conversation round to a payoff point, and they never really do that on those shows. They all sort of step on each other,
Yeah.
So, and I suppose you do that. That's the one thing when I have done music that I've liked about it was an element where you make space for other people.
Yes.
Or you can see it's better if something goes at this point and you support it rather than
but there's no reason why you couldn't.
It's about the bigger picture, isn't it?
There's no reason why you couldn't do that on a panel show. You would think at the end of the day, if this is a funny show, then we all look better. Well, surely that.
Yeah, no, I just think everyone wants to get noticed.
Yeah,
people want to get noticed now. But you don't want to be sitting in this dressing room in the afternoon sounding like you're going, why can't everything be made of wood?
yeah.
What's this plastic?
It's like a Damon Albarn thing, but he picked on the wrong person there with Taylor Swift. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Of all the people that picked, Jesus Christ, A, she does write stuff, and B, there are 14 billion people who are going to jump on you for saying it.
I noticed that with this group, Wet Leg. Have you seen them?
I've not seen them. I've seen them.
They that started off that they've been put together by men as a sort of. I thought, well, they probably haven't, but it really quickly attached itself to women groups.
It does, yeah.
But I think weren't the Kings of Leon? You'll probably get libel, but didn't the Kings of Leon? Didn't their uncle write it all or something?
There is the rumour that allegedly,
and he was in the Remains or some '60s garage band?
Very possible. I don't know, but I've heard that before. But then that all came out that people arguing against what Damon Albarn said. Well, you wrote all the songs for Elastica. Hang on a minute, you're just doing what you've just accused him of.
They're old Wire songs, aren't they? Elastica.
Well, they are old Wire songs. Yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with ripping off Stranglers. Wire,
yeah. Actually, that's the thing. That's another thing. Since the fall stopped, is you can sort of see, with the benefit of hindsight, you can see all the things that went into your period from other people that you kind of and how they get mangled and changed around and because like you say, people have made studies of it now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But I think what was in our favour is we were never really good enough. If you rip something off, we were never really good enough to play it properly.
So it came out.
Something completely different. Yeah.
Hey, Me as Hugh Maggot, right?
Yeah.
Is that Adamski single? From
Apparently, well, according to Mark Riley, he's nicked, that's where Mark nicked the riff from, yeah, that babysit.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've got it. I've got the...
You've got
Yeah, I've got the 7 inch.
But because the interesting thing with that is, it's credited on the album to Smith, because he wrote it all, but if on the PRS database, he's credited the music to Mark Riley. So he's either made a mistake, or he thought, if they come after me, it's going to have to say Mark Riley on the credits. Which, I wouldn't put it past him.
No.
Good record, that.
It is, yeah.
What was he called then?
What was it called?
They were called
Stupid Baby.
Something like that, right? Yeah. But he was like 11, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was like 11, yeah. It was really catchy.
And on that bombshell, I think we're about to the hour point there. I think don't want to keep you too long. I know you've got to do your warm-ups and your
vocals. Have to do a long period of Pilates before
personal trainers coming in at 4.
That's you know what? It's if I'd got on top of this, I would have just interviewed you two for an hour about things I wanted to know about. But I might start a podcast.
Well, if there's anything you want to get out,
what would you? The Elephant Fayre, that Elephant Fayre.
Oh, let's talk about the Elephant Fayre.
That was a really big deal for me because I've been listening to the Fall for like 3 years.
So how old were you then? When
I was 16.
So you've been listening since you were
13. Yeah, I'll tell you, the first thing I heard that I remember going was Look No, so that'd be 81, 82.
Yeah.
And in Birmingham...
Is it still running?
Yeah. In Birmingham, it was quite difficult to see things because a lot of the venues were very... There was a lot of tight licensing about things, and you didn't tend to play in sorts of places where a 13-year-old would get in, you know. And I said to my mum, can I go and see the Fall at this festival? And she went, no. And I went, why? Because there'll be loads of people on drugs. And it's miles away, and you're going on your own. And she went, all right, if you do all right in your O-levels, you can. And I did. Right. So thanks for that. Ended up at university on the incentive.
Changed your life. There was one thing I wanted to pull up on. That you always say you had the drumstick of mine that I threw into the audience.
Yeah,
there is no way on God's earth I threw a drumstick.
No way.
Well, I've got...
How did he get it into...
How did it get into your hands? Because I would have then had to go back to Mark and say, can I have some money for drumsticks?
No, it's broken. It's snapped.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
even so. Unless it broke while I was throwing. But who do you think I am? The drummer I Iron Maiden? I wasn't throwing the drums.
I don't know why. Well, I remember it being... I don't know. Anyway, I've got it in a pot with a bit of piano that Mercury Rev smashed to bits. So it's in the archive of the Holy Object. So she sort of I could go there. And so I went there and of course it was exactly what it's, and I never seen anything like it. And then, but I saw a lot of it was a little festival, wasn't it? Like they used to be, Little Old Hippie Festival. And I remember seeing a lot of early alternative comics, like the Pegley and the Popticians and Malcolm Hardy, which was good, and then John Martin in the afternoon without knowing what he was. Then at you lot lit by there were flames, wasn't there?
Yeah, there were torches,
flames on the side, and also seeing the group wandering around in the afternoon as a group and looking like they had an identity, and it was interesting. You all looked so young as well, which was weird. Thinking not much older than us, even though there was already 4 or 5 great albums in the can. And I just remember it being absolutely just spellbinding because it was towards the end of. That was my favourite period to that point, and it was towards the end of that, and there was still enough linkage back to the big epic tracks of Ex-Induction Hour and Perverted by Language and stuff, and but then it was also interesting feeling that tighter sort of popular stuff coming in, but it was great. And then after that, I went and wandered about. And I've only really worked out years later that I was obviously spiked with LSD or magic mushrooms or something, because I have all these memories of it. And then years later I think, that obviously... I remember going in this tent. And this woman saying, do you want some mushrooms? something. I went, oh yeah, right. And then there was a covers band on, and I've always been saying to people for years, there was a covers band on at the Elephant Fayre in this little tent, and they played a version of The Fool on the Hill by the Beatles. It went on for 4 hours. And it was all like changing, and no, it's only a few years later I thought. I also thought, on the same, after watching this 4-hour performance of...
How long were you there?
I went out, and one of my O-levels that I had to do well in, you had to do a project in history, and I did, this sounds so precocious, but never mind, I did the difference between King Arthur in mythology and history, right? That was my O-level project. And I read this, got to these old things, like Nennius was a 8th century Welsh monk who wrote about King Arthur. And I remember coming out of that 4-hour performance of Fool on the Hill, having a long conversation with a man who said he was an antiques dealer. And he had read Nennius and talking to him for ages about Nennius and thinking how weird it was that I would meet this bloke. Of course, that obviously didn't happen.
But the best in the world, how did it come up in conversation?
Exactly. How did it come up? So, I mean, now I think, I wonder, but I know you were there. I know that, that was before this.
Yeah.
But the great thing about that is that I got that out of the way, I realised, without even knowing it had happened, you know?
Yeah, that's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, but no, it was absolutely, I mean, it's a very vivid memory of the torches either side of the stage. And then you could, after that, you know, I was old enough to get to see the Fall, you know, a couple of times a year.
Right.
Although I had a weird period between about 92 and 95 where I went to kind of Oedipal struggle with it. And I thought, I just keep listening to this all the time. I've got to... And I sort of stopped for about 3 years and I missed what was quite a good period, I think.
92, 95.
Yeah, after, when it was a bit electronic-y and then before it went
the
back
Dave
to
Bush period.
more like a garage band, yeah.
I thought, well, that was Lost in Music, which I think still says the best cover version the Fall ever did. Miles.
My brother-in-law in Sweden has only heard one Fall album, and it was that one. And he goes, I love the bit when they're in the pub and Lost in Music's playing, and he's obviously arguing with the landlord about the kids being in there and trying to say something in French. I thought, oh yeah, if you don't know, it's like a sort of piece of comedy drama almost, where he's sort of going, put the money on the table, but to someone in another language. Or
Yeah. I mean, that's because I was never a massive fan of Ghost in My House, and because they're just a bit strange. Yeah. But there's that. I mean, it's not. I'm not going to stick my neck and say it's better than the Sister Sledge version, but it's you know, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I remember when it was suggested, I was thinking, oh my God, I've got to play like him.
Bernard Edwards.
Yeah.
The last time I saw them before my 3-year divorce from the Fall was at the Glastonbury about 91, 92, wasn't it? I think you were on the main stage in the afternoon, and then the next time I saw it after that was at that story in about 95. So there was only like a 3-year period where I didn't. And then the last 20 years, it was because
you've seen them a lot.
Seen all, because you could always get to things, you know.
Yeah.
But how did you, when you did the Spinal Tap riff? Were you not worried about being so obviously the same? Were you not worried about? I know it's funny that Smith didn't know what it was.
No, he knew what it was.
He knew,
but I don't know.
He'd seen Spinal Tap about 5 million times.
There's a thing that you put on the topos, but I don't know. I always had that thing that by the time everyone, like, because it's guitars and things and by the time everyone's finished putting everything over the top.
You must be joking. It's still exactly the same.
Sometimes you don't get away with it. We haven't got away with it a few times.
What do you think when you hear things now like this? Have you heard this tune yards, are they called? Or
no. Yard.
What are they called? Yard.
Yeah, we're talking about it before,
yeah, tune yards. That's how you put your dad, isn't it? Yeah, this
He's wearing it.
Are they like the Fall?
I don't listen to the album. There's bits, yeah. Where is it?
It wouldn't exist without the Fall.
I don't know, but you can hear it. But I don't.
When it was true at the time, wasn't it?
I listened to them, I thought, they're good, but there's no energy in it.
Right.
They don't seem to put the energy in. We were like.
I'll tell you what it is. It's sort of similar, but it isn't. It isn't confusing in the way that you.
I thought, come on, lads, put a bit more.
Who was I watching the other day? And I was thinking, it was the English new band. Tom York. I can't what they call them. I can't remember what they're called now, but I was watching them and I was thinking, well, you hate them fucking drummers. You know, tippy tappy. Well, you hate them. But no, apart from that, it's very good, but I don't like drummers who piss about like that.
Who's your favourite drummer then?
Of all time, Ringo, it's got to be.
Really?
Ringo and then John Marr at Buzzcocks, I think. But that's a more fanboy thing. But I think Ringo completely rewrote the book.
He's maligned, isn't he? Though?
He is unbelievable.
You really see in that film that, you know.
You look for that film. I mean, I can't believe some looks at it. Nobody tells him what to do at any point. They tell George what to do. Paul says to John, it's this. John says to Paul, it's this. Ringo sits at the back, and then he comes up with, with something that's exactly right for the song. Yeah. And I think he is much maligned. And I don't know why.
No. And what about with bass? Because your bass doesn't sound like anyone else.
Ooh. What favourite bass player?
Yeah. It's not like I think.
Yeah, favourite bass player. Who are you trying to play like? They're two different things, aren't they?
Yeah. Not really trying to play like anyone, I don't think. No, maybe. No. Tracy Pugh, he was good for the birthday party.
You've tried to play like Tracy Pugh. Give up.
I've got a joke tonight that only you will understand. Based on knowing an early birthday party track, and the audience laugh at it. I know no one knows what it is about.
Well, listen out for that.
Tracy Pugh. What did you? Were you on something like An Older Lover? Were you able to have quite a lot of fun with that? That's led by the bass, isn't it? Really? When there's everything else is space around it. Was that something where you could change things a lot? Or
I can't remember how that came about now. That song who wrote that?
I don't know. I don't think anybody wrote it. There's a certain songs and you certain things. Nobody, like Ed Priest, I always say, nobody wrote that song. It was just five people in a room just playing what they want themselves. It's been Mark suggested that he wrote it, but there's certain songs you think nobody has said to somebody play this, and that's one of them.
Yeah, no. That's the one. I mean, there is songs where Craig said, I've got this bass line and Mark and other people, but that's not one of them.
Mark's theory is that Under Pressure by the Queen's ripped off an old one.
Really? Funny, Though again, I sort of think, when it all finished. You look at some of those things, you think he was trying to create. It was a private joke. Say these ridiculous things. And say that something that never would have heard of him was copied off him. And I kind of get that because sometimes it's just easier when you're being interviewed to just change the subject and say something that will draw the fire away.
I love that about his interviews. I mean, before I joined the Fall. And when I first joined, his between song patter was it was almost as good as the songs. He could rip you can hear it on Total Turns. Are you doing what you did 2 years ago? Yeah,
someone's done a book of that. Do you remember a group called the Country Teasers?
Vaguely, I don't know.
They were like an Edinburgh sort of rockabilly band, but the attitude was very like the Fall in terms of he'd write about socially contentious subjects, the guy, and they did a song that was exactly the same as Fiery Jack, and in it he started saying, people say I've copied this off Fiery Jack and I haven't, right? That was really funny. So at the end, this is about 20 years ago, I shouted out, are you doing what you did 10 years ago? And he went, no, and I won't make a career out of it.
Brilliant. But he steps away from that because I think people are talking about that more than the song. And then similarly in interviews, there's a period with his interviews and you just think, I could read these interviews and never listen to it. Not I, but I don't really need to listen to the Fall to me. These interviews are just great. But then it came a bit sort of parody of himself in a way, which because that's when we had Martin Brahma, we had him on the post, and he was saying this character that he created. Mark sort of created this character that was half him and half Kay Carroll. Oh, really? So when Kay went, he created, he got this character that was like, and then the problem with that is with any of them is when it's your name, it becomes you, doesn't it, and you become it. So
no, I mean, I have trouble with that really to some extent. That's why this has been taking me so long, especially writing this introduction to this book, The Bloater, which has been out of print for 52 years, and I really like it, and obviously turned up on the search engine as the best well-known person that likes it, because everyone else is three professionals.
Well known for writing forwards.
And then he goes, then I and I know that I've only been asked to do it really because I'm an E-list celebrity, and that there's obviously some professor in Indiana that's better at it than it. And I thought,
but he's not better at writing introductions.
I got the introduction. Then I thought, well, what am I supposed to be writing? Am I supposed to be writing as me, or is it supposed to be the comedian, or an awkward mess of both? And I sometimes wish I'd made the distinction.
Well, yeah, I tell you, I always think that about Al Murray,
Pub Landlord,
using his real name for that.
Yeah, I know, it's really really weird that happened. I lived with him at the time he was developing that character, and I just never thought it would be that popular.
Right.
But then he had a thing that, he had a difficult thing where the problem was that started out as a sort of parody of something that in the end became mainstream thinking.
Yeah, I know. It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of the people that are going along just agreed with it.
Yeah.
And
you're fucked now, aren't you?
Yeah, especially when it comes out that he's basically an upper class member of the aristocracy. I think actually if Mark hadn't died when he had done, the polarisation of British politics might have been a difficult thing for him to write about.
Yeah.
Because he liked to take a contrary position.
That's right.
For either because he believed it or for comic effect, and I don't really care which it was.
I'm not sure he even knew himself.
But the problem now is things are so polarised, and it's not. The establishment of Etonian people say that they're fighting against the establishment.
Yeah.
Of the Labour Party and woke people. It just doesn't. I don't know where he would have landed now.
No.
In terms of, and I expect it might have become quite uncomfortable.
Yeah. I think it's best he'd have been clever enough to sidestep it. You'd like to think, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But it's difficult to not express a real opinion about some of the shit that's going on now.
I've thought over the last couple of years what Mark would have made of all this, though.
I think you would have got some good stuff out of 2 years of lockdown.
Yeah.
But I think you would have said people were weak for staying in their house.
Yeah. I don't think he'd have been the greatest mask advocate, do you?
I think in a way the reputation of the group may have dodged a bullet there. It could have gone pretty. It might have been really, because a lot of people are saying some weird things. Like Janice Coleman's anti-vax, isn't he? Yeah. There's some, and Van Morrison as well.
Van fucking Brown. Well, the only thing I'll say is Eric Clapton couldn't have gone down in my estimation.
No.
So that's all right.
Yeah.
Always thought he clearly is.
That stuff never stuck to him, did it? Though all that rock against racism stuff.
Well, not enough.
No.
It stuck to him a bit among certain people. But that wasn't a coy one sentence in an interview with The Guardian. That was the standing on stage saying. Yeah. Just unspeakable stuff.
Yeah.
And he still bounced back for him, and he still gets sympathetic treatment. Right, we're not ending on Eric Clapton, are we? Please
move it around.
Yeah, you have to move it. Get Eric Clapton towards the beginning.
It's good if you can end on. I like if you can end on a sort of hanging cage. Someone going. And I sometimes wonder, it might all have been different if something had happened like that. And then you go, thank you for joining us. You finish like that.
There you go.
That's how you finish a podcast.
Well, that was the one we did at Christmas. Was it ends on with Steve saying, "We'll have to cut that bit about Rolf Harris out." that was my brother Harry. He said that I saw two people at the Hacienda, Rolf Harris and The Fall, and I'm less embarrassed about seeing Rolf.
Which one do you regret the most?
Brilliant.
Have you seen that all women's Fall covers band?
Yeah. The Fall did Iceland with them, didn't
I did down the garden actually.
Oh, did you? Right. Okay.
Yeah, The Fall women, they're great, aren't they?
They were really good. Yeah, they're.
Oh, really like that.
There'd have been a good lineup of The Fall. But they really take their time over working it all out. I think it's quite a good little exercise for them. It's interesting again with that how which ones work and which don't when people try and change things.
Because we've tried Totally Wired. You'd think Totally Wired would be the easiest one in the world to do. We've tried it. We did it with Tom. We did it with Extra Care. It's been shit every time we've ever done it. So much, as far as I'm concerned, because it turns into some. Because it's the thing about Totally Wired is it's got a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it's got a structure, which is unusual for the Fall. And then it ends up lasting a quarter of a fucking hour and pissing about. Never lost.
And it's anything but totally wired.
Anything but totally wired, yeah.
Have you heard the last Shadow Puppets version?
I have. The last Shadow Puppets version is quite like the way we did it with the Extricated, really, which is not. It's not bad, but there's still too much. You know, we're going to get a bit edgy here now. We're all drop it down, and all, which was great on some fall songs, but that's the one song that doesn't need it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stuart.
Right, well, no, thank you, and not just for today. A life-changing,
That's like you.
You must get people saying that all the time.
Thanks for joining us this week on Oh Brother. Episodes are released every second Monday, so watch for the next episode in 2 weeks. Please follow us on Twitter at Oh Brother Show, where you can find a link to Spotify and subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher or RSS, so you'll never miss an episode. While you're at it, give us a rating on iTunes, subscribe on the YouTubes, or just tell your friends. For further reading, you can check out our books about the fall, The Bid Midweek and How a Bleeding Guess, which includes a foreword by Mr. Stewart Lee, available from Root Publishers and all good bookstores. Hope to speak to you all again soon. Remember, if you're driving, take your car. Ta-ra.